My neighbor once mentioned my mother's name. I had never told him I had a mother. I had never told him anything about my family. We had spoken maybe 4 times. All 4 conversations were about the weather. He said her name the way you say the name of someone you've known for years. Casual. Comfortable. Like it was nothing. That was the moment I understood that something was very wrong with the man who lived next door to me. I moved into the apartment in March. 3rd floor. Corner unit. The kind of place that feels safe because you're high enough off the ground to feel removed from everything below. I had just ended a long relationship and I needed somewhere new. Somewhere that didn't have her in every corner. The building was quiet. 12 units. Mostly older tenants who kept to themselves. Exactly what I wanted. I met my neighbor for the first time the week I moved in. He was standing in the hallway when I came out of my door with a trash bag. He was maybe 60 years old. Short. Pale in the way that people get pale when they don't go outside much. He was wearing a gray cardigan and he was just standing there. Not walking anywhere. Not going to his door. Just standing in the hallway, looking at nothing. He turned when he heard me. And he smiled. It was a perfectly normal smile. That was the problem with everything about him. It was always perfectly normal. Right up until it wasn't. He said his name was Gerald. I said my name was Michael. He said he knew. I assumed the landlord had told him a new tenant was moving in. I didn't think anything of it. We talked for maybe 3 minutes. He asked how I was settling in. I said fine. He said good. He said the building was very quiet and he liked it that way. Then he went back inside his apartment and closed the door. I went back inside mine, and I forgot about him entirely. For about 2 weeks. The second time we spoke, he asked me how work was going. I hadn't told him where I worked. I hadn't told him I had a job at all. But I brushed it off. Buildings talk. Neighbors hear things through walls. Maybe the landlord mentioned it. The third time was stranger. I was coming home late on a Thursday. It had been a bad day. One of those days where everything goes slightly wrong in ways too small to complain about, but large enough to wear you down completely. Gerald was in the hallway again. Same spot, same cardigan. He looked at me and said, "Rough day?" I said, "Yeah." He nodded slowly and said, "These things pass, Michael." The situation with the Henderson account will resolve itself. I stopped walking. The Henderson account was an internal project name at my company. It had never appeared in any email I had sent from my personal devices. It was not something I had ever mentioned to anyone outside of work. I looked at him. He was already turning back toward his door, completely calm, like he hadn't just said something that made no sense. I stood in that hallway for a long time after his door closed, trying to find an explanation. I couldn't find one. The fourth conversation was the one that changed everything. It was a Sunday morning. I had slept badly. I was making coffee and I heard a knock at my door. It was Gerald. He was holding a small paper bag. He said he had made too many muffins and thought I might want some. I took the bag. I thanked him. He stood in the doorway for a moment and then he said, "How is your mother, Michael?" I didn't answer immediately, because my mother had died 4 years earlier. And no one in that building knew that. No one in that city knew that. I had moved specifically to get away from everyone who did. I asked him what he meant. He tilted his head slightly, like the question confused him. He said, "Patricia. She's been having a hard time since the move. I imagine the winters are difficult for her now." My mother's name was Patricia. She had moved to Florida 3 months before she died because her doctor said the cold was bad for her. I closed the door. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the paper bag in my hands, and I stayed there for a very long time. Then I started searching. I searched his name, Gerald. I didn't even know his last name. I went to the landlord's office that afternoon, and I told her I needed to know the full name of the tenant in 3B. She looked at me strangely. She said, "There's no tenant in 3B." I told her I'd spoken to him 4 times. She said that unit had been vacant for 11 months. She said the last tenant had been a woman in her 70s who moved to assisted living. I went back upstairs. I walked to the door of 3B. I knocked. Nothing. I put my hand on the door. It was cold. Colder than the hallway. Colder than it should have been. I called the landlord from the hallway and asked her to open it. She came up with her keys. She unlocked the door. We both looked inside. Empty. Completely empty. No furniture. No cardigan hanging by the door. No smell of muffins. Nothing. Except on the wall beside the window, written in pencil, so lightly you almost missed it, a name. Patricia. I didn't sleep in that apartment again. I stayed with a friend for 2 weeks, and I told him it was a plumbing issue. I didn't tell him the truth because I didn't know how to say it out loud without sounding like I had lost my mind. But I kept thinking about it. about the Henderson account, about Florida, about the name on the wall. So I started going back through everything. I pulled my mother's death certificate. I pulled the records from the hospital. I pulled every document I had from the last years of her life. And I found something. In her personal papers, there was a letter, unopened, addressed to her from an address I didn't recognize. The return address was my building, Unit 3B. The letter was dated 8 years ago, 3 years before I ever moved in. I opened it. The handwriting was careful and small. It said, "Patricia, your son will be all right. I will watch out for him. I made you a promise, and I intend to keep it. You have nothing to worry about. G." My mother had known him. Whatever he was, whatever Gerald was, she had known him. And she had asked him to watch over me. I moved out at the end of that month. I've never gone back. I've never told the landlord what I found. I don't think it would change anything. I think about Gerald sometimes. I think about the way he stood in the hallway, not going anywhere, just there. I think about the muffins that I never ate and threw away, still in the bag. I think about my mother writing to an address in a building I wouldn't move into for another 3 years. I don't know how that's possible. I have stopped trying to understand it. What I know is this. In the 18 months since I moved out, nothing bad has happened to me. No accidents, no close calls, nothing. And sometimes, late at night, when the building I live in now is very quiet, I hear something in the hallway outside my door. Not footsteps exactly. More like the sound of someone standing very still. I never open the door when I hear it. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because I think I know who it is. And I think he's keeping his promise. If this story kept you up tonight, you're not alone. Subscribe for new stories every week. The next one is already waiting for you.